Hello, everybody. This is Evan Abrams. Thanks for coming out to the live stream. Good to see lots of people showing up in the chat early and helping me with my description. Thank you, Tim. It's still early. It's still early. And I'm going to. Hello, everybody. Whoop. Also, my speakers are on, so now I'm also hearing myself. Oh boy. So, welcome everybody. Today we are going to talk about text layers in Adobe After Effects. I'm Evan Abrams. Let me know who you are in the stream, where you're from, and what questions you may have about these strange and mysterious text layers found in After Effects. We got folks from Marseille. Or 3 p.m. in Belgium. That's true, and it's a different time everywhere in the world. That's kind of how time works. It's fun like that. I have my creepy gnome mug, so we are good to go. Just some things before we really get into it. If you enjoy me talking to you live, next week I'll be in San Francisco on the Adobe live streams, hanging out with the good folks down there, making interesting stuff live. I'll be there with Jake Bartlett of Jake in Motion, and we will be making some cool stuff together. So next week, tune into Adobe's live streams. You'll see me there. Big thanks to everybody who's coming out. We got, Lancaster, California. Oh, it's Charlie. Hey, Charlie, what's going on? Oh, man. So, our first question, let's jump into it. Am I coming to IBC? I'm not coming to IBC, I don't believe. No plans yet. I don't usually. Don't make a lot of trips in my day. So, we've got a question on the board from Peter Bokor? Peter, B-O-K-O-R. Question. What is your view on preparing text in Illustrator plus Overlord / Photoshop plus Convert to Editor text working just in AE with text? Well, it really depends. Really depends on what you're doing. So in some cases, the typographical tools in Illustrator are going to be a little bit nicer for kerning, setting things up. And once you've got that set, if you know you're not going to be doing a lot of things with Adobe's text animators, go nuts, But what's great about preserving the text as a text layer is you can still use those things. Just, it really depends where you're comfortable. Generally, I use Illustrator if I'm going to be sort of breaking the thing up and I know I'm going to be doing really weird things with the shape layers, or I need to just change some of the glyphs a little bit, then we would probably get into it there. Photoshop I actually don't open up a lot. That is not a thing I get down with. So, it's, Now, Sean, I'm not sure about Flight of the Conchords. You may have not heard of a group called Salt and Peppa, who sing a song that I will not quote, but let's just say that you'll figure it out. So, questions about text. What's the plant called? That is a Home Depot palm tree from the wilds of Home Depot. Don't know what that is. Okay, what do we got going on here? How do you scroll through fonts? Well, just grab the thing and scroll around. Can you access glyphs? That's a good question. Can you access the glyphs? I don't believe... before I put my foot in my mouth and say you can do that, and then we go on a search for it, what we want to do is find... See, the open type window isn't in there, right? So we don't really have that great stuff. Jungles of Home Depot. So those types of things, the font has glyphs in it. So for example, when you're going between like optical and the metric kerning, the kind of auto kerning stuff, it's still accessing that information, but being able to swap them out is not quite the same. So, how to be creative when starting a project? It's tough. You got to do a lot of stuff. Are there any expressions that could be made to change or parent text font? Interesting one, Ayub. So we're being asked here, is there an expression that could be made to change or parent text font? I'm guessing that you want to basically type something out and then later, once everything's done, you want to mess with the font of the text, right? And so with those types of things, it's not super easy to do that. Now, the reason is because the font information is being stored inside the source text, basically. So if you're changing those things, then what you're going to end up doing is altering the entire source text. So that can be a little bit dicey. There are scripts that you can use that will access that stuff, that will spit out basically what the font is. It is a little bit, you have to go a little bit deeper into it, and it's not immediately accessible with what we've got on hand. So when it comes to the idea of, oh, well, I'll make a template and then I'll sort of allow someone later to change the fonts, not as easy, right? So what is generally a good idea, and especially because if people are using a certain template, a certain font, everything's set up to work with the font that you've chosen, right? So if I'm like, well, I'm really enjoying that Gotham book, but what I'd like to do is change it to Gotham Bold, and then that changes, and then it doesn't fit with everything else. So it's best to it's not really monkey around with that sometimes. But like I said, sometimes it's unavoidable. Exactly, Kyle. Yeah, so the font is not accessible with that stuff. Okay, anything else about looking for someone asked what the microphone is. This is a Blue Yeti. Yeah, it's just the Yeti by Blue. It's pretty good. Is there a way to do a sliding text reveal without using track mats or masks and be able to save it as a preset? Nicholas Harmack. Nicholas, let's talk, Nicholas. You've got my attention here. Is there a way to do a sliding text reveal without using track mats or masks and be able to save it as a preset? So, Nicholas, tell me more about what that means. Like you're basically, I'll tell you what. Yeah, Nicholas, I'm going to switch into After Effects here as I go to the desktop. And I'm going to guess what you're asking about is sort of when text is revealed by like coming up or down. Well, look, I've already got some text out there. I'm very well prepared today. And what we might do, something that I do all the time, is basically, ooh, gross. Oopsie doodle. There we go. Is I work with text so that it does something like this. Scale that down. So the text is like coming up like this, and then we would just use a mask like this. And then it's like, oh, the text is coming up, right? Is that so, Nicholas? This is the thing that you can make with masks, and you're saying, well, what should I be doing to do this, but without a mask or without without a mat, without those kinds of things. Yep, someone's saying use the linear wipe. That's something, because a linear wipe can be saved into the presets, right? Like a preset could be that. Yeah, so if you're thinking, well, I want to save these things as a preset of some kind, save animation preset, blah. Let's just call it untitled, sure. If we went new text, and we type it on the text, then if we applied that thing that we said, untitled. So as you can see, because we selected the masks and stuff, the mask is there also. It's also sort of the wrong size, right? So and it's going to be dependent on descenders and blah, blah, blah. So you can make the mask part of the preset, right? You can definitely do that. So that's a thing you could do Keeps it all in one layer. But you want to do it without a mask and without a track mat. As you can see, it's kind of early for me. I'm not sure, because we need something that'll define the visible space. So it's either going to be an effect, or it's going to be, a mask, or it's going to be a track mat, right? You can do things sort of with the mask to have it kind of auto size to the layer, but then the layer size is also changing dependent on, so if this mask wasn't here, the layer size, as you can see, is changing, so that whole size is different. So that is a stumper. I might have to think about that for a while. How could you do it without those things? I guess the big question is, why would you do it without those things? It just comes to mind for me. I guess you want it to be a preset, so you don't have to click twice. I would just use masks. You just click and drag a box around things, and it's easy, right? And that would be that. If anybody knows a different way, there are other effects, and there are specific effects around the mat, like matting things, or you could use the crop effect. That would do it as well. Need for speed, usually. Well, 2 clicks, 1 click. How long does it take for you to click? I'm messing around. Spicy today. Okay, so hopefully that helps. We'll have to come back to figure out. Generally, if you use an effect, that would work, right? What is the benefit of origin along the path for text? Now we're going to kick it back and find another question to examine. Feeling slow today. I don't know what that's all about. So let's have a look at the old questions here. Boop, 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 boop. Go use the Essential Graphics panel. How to use expressions with text layers, especially if you have several fonts in your layer. Not sure how would you have several fonts in your layer there, Joel. A text layer generally has the one font, unless you're selecting bunches of things and dropping fonts in there. But then when you, like we talked about, Joel, I'm not sure if you were around earlier when we talked about how the source text holds the font information. So what you would want to do if you have multiple fonts is, oh man, it gets a little bit dicey, this idea, but you might want to try to define parts of things. What could you do? What could you actually do to limit stuff? When you're messing around with multiple fonts on a text layer, this is when you're bumping up into one of the trubs, right? And the trouble being that because the source text holds so much stuff, it becomes very difficult. Let's say work around it if you can. But again, all right. Boop, 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 boop. Question. Sorry, I'm just reading. Do you know how to have a dynamic centering of a comp made with different text layers when texts appear by typewriter effect, for example, and change the size of the group? Okay. Let's see if I can remember this one. That's Sylvain Amstad. Sylvain, let me see if I can remember specifically what the expression was that I used. So I'm just going to kick it back to the old desktop here. So let's make some text. My favorite thing to do. Typewriter, type out text. There we go. So I guess the question was, so we've got this text and we want it to be constantly in the center. And how would we have it be constantly in the center? If, for example, we were to use the typewriter preset on here. Now what the typewriter preset is doing is using, I believe it's using opacity. So if you check in, whoop, whoop, it is using the opacity, right? So that's not actually changing the size of the layer. What we would use instead is we would add the property of scale on here instead. So what's happening is each of these letters are scaling up, right? And the trouble now is that the anchor point, we basically want this to be like in the middle. Call this up. So we want it to be like in the middle, and then, oh, there's less stuff. Oh, it should still be in the middle, right? If I'm following you, that's the idea. Well, that's going to come down to messing around with the anchor point in a meaningful way. Bear with me while I try to remember this thing. So what we want to do, we're going to eventually have x comma y outputs. And x, sort of horizontal here, is going to be something. Y is going to be something. So our trouble is x should be equal to this layer dot source rect at time. Dot left. Oops, not like that, you don't. Bam. Oh, I don't know why I'm thinking so much. Oh no, I'm spelling things wrong. It's going bad. Source rect at time. Is it capital this layer? How do we point to this layer? Boop, 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 boop. It's gonna do this. What am I missing? This. There we go. Huh. So I think it's left plus or minus. Frig. This is gonna be bad. So things are going poorly. All right. So we're gonna copy this. Width divided by 2. Oh, maybe it's plus width divided by 2. There we go. Oof. Oh, boy. So, I'm just going to line this up. So, in response to your previous question, asker, here's how you would do it. After I struggle to get my mind to figure it out. So what we're doing is we're altering the anchor point here. So we've got x and y outputs. Y is just going to be the value, whatever, who cares? We can perform the same operation on the height if we want to, right? But what we're doing is we're saying x is going to be equal to this particular layer's box. So when we say source rect at time, that is the box here. You see these little points? It's that box that it's returning to us. And dot left is basically where the baseline starts, right? And the baseline kind of starts at, in our case, because we're using center aligned, starts in the middle, right? So the different distance between that baseline shift and the paragraph shift anyway, and the leftmost edge. And then we're adding the width to that. So we start with a negative number, then we're adding half of the width to it, and that mathematically puts us back in the center. So it's it's a bit of a complex thing, but you just kind of copy paste, put that in, and then it works, right? Because as this is growing, this leftmost, how far to the left it is changing, the overall width is changing, and it's all changing correctly to end up with that output. We can do the same kind of thing on the height. We could take this, copy this, and we perform the same kind of move, except with, instead of dot left, it's dot top, and instead of dot width, it's dot height, like that. And now, even if you've got those descenders that come on, everything is always in the middle. I wouldn't do that because ascenders and descenders should just go up and down as normal. So I would just probably type in value. Like that. Does that answer the question? I don't know. Okay, good. I think we nailed it. And, I just fumble through an expression for a little while. Good live TV. We're nailing it. We're really nailing the live. Anything could happen when it's live, even me being woefully underprepared. So, what else have we got going on? What else is good in the... Can I explain this text effect? Well, then I would have to load that thing. Maybe... Oh, now I can't just click on the link. King Tsunami? Is that how you'd say that? Oh man, I would have to like copy and paste this thing. Is there a better way to send links in the chat? I am not great at that. Maybe we'll get to it later. Post a link in the thing I can click on, and then we'll get into it. What are we talking about? So just to reiterate, we are talking about text layers. And we are trying to sort of demystify kind of what links are not allowed in chat. Well, I don't know how would you link something? Oh yeah, can we explain parts like the shape and ease, high, low? Sure, we can do that. I think that's probably helpful. And we can do that. So we're talking about text layers. So that's probably a good. Oh yeah, and then I think we'll talk about some of the text layer stuff, and then we'll talk about this write-on thing, and we'll get to that. So coming up next, that's in our queue. Let's just quickly go back to the desktop, and we'll talk about that advanced tab, and then we're going to do some write-on stuff. Write-on. My dad says write-on all the time, just for everything. It's like, oh, how was your day? Oh, it's pretty good. Right on. That's how we communicate. So let's put some text out there. Advanced tab text. All right. So we've got our advanced tab text. What does that advanced tab mean? Like, what is that stuff? What's in there? Why would we access it? Well, all right. So twirl into the text. There's a bunch of things in here, and they're not, right now there's not a lot. Like we got path options, which is about putting text along a path. We've got more options, which is about our anchor point grouping. So we've got that going on. So anchor point grouping is, have a look here, these little red X's. I'm going to change this to be fuchsia. Sorry. Oh boy. I'm dying out. So, see these little X's here? This little X, that's the anchor point. So the anchor point grouping could be based on the character, could be based on the word. Now we've only got one per word. We can change where this is, and we can start to notice what that is changing if, for example, we just rotate it a little bit. So you can see if it's based on the word, all the words are rotating as groups. If it's based on the character, all the characters are going. If it's based on the line, it's based on the whole line somewhere, right? And then you can change where the anchor point is relative to the stuff, right? So far, so good. Okay, so let's try to explain what the advanced tab is about. And that's the advanced tab of a range selector. And before we talk about that, we also sort of have to talk about what the basics of this are. Before we talk about the advanced thing, what are we even looking at? Okay. Glad I switched to fuchsia, because that's going to make this so much nicer to look at. So right now I've decided that I'm going to apply a rotation to this. I'm going to add actually a property. That's going to be the position property. So let's get that out. So let me just compress all this back together. In Animator 1, I'm changing the position. And now see when I do this, everything moves. So let's say it was 100. So 0, 100. All of you text, whenever I speak to After Effects, I speak in a commanding voice, so it does what I want. Basically, I've got this range selector, and the range is going from 0 to 100%, meaning it's selecting everything. And of that, I'm altering the position by this. So this position is happening to this range. Okay. And right now, in the advanced, we're basically saying, well, what units do we use to define our range? Could be the index, could be the percentage, right? And if we're going to do the index, is that based on characters excluding spaces, words, lines? So we could say words. And then we're saying, well, go from 0 to 2. So only these 2 words, or only this 1 word, right? That's what you can do with that. Or you could do it by character. And if that's the case, then you're able to select a range of characters, number of characters, or characters excluding spaces, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just going to put this back on %, just so % index, it's really just saying, how do you define your range? And sometimes you need to do one way or the other way. So where things get a little dicey is when we're at mode. So right now we're at add, right? If I were to say subtract, basically I'm saying, okay, for this range, you're not doing this. It's the inverse relationship. So I'm just going to put this to 50%. And so what we can see based on what I've done is that from 50 to 100, this area here that is selected is not having this happen to it. If I say it's add, it's the inverse. You know, this 50 to 100 is having this done to it, right? So that's add, subtract, intersect, min, max, difference. You can start to have different range selectors that interact with each other. It starts to get pretty wacky pretty fast. The amount is how much is that actually applying. We can see it visually here because, because the amount, if we say 50%, well, then it's going, half of what 100% is. And that's basically how much of this change are you actually applying to this range. All right, so far so good, right? It's pretty basic stuff. Now here's the shape. Imagine, if you will, and it's easy to imagine because we're using, we're using the position here. Imagine, if you will, that there is a physical shape here. If I were to change that to a triangle, looky look, it's the shape of a triangle, right? And the range is how big the triangle is. You're probably asking yourself right now, when would I use that? How hideous. Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So we got the triangle, the round, similar to the triangle, but it's round, right? Smooth, similar to the round, but it's smooth, right? It's got that nice ease in, ease out look. And here are the ramp up and ramp down. So other than square, ramp up and ramp down are two of the more common ones that we use. And what's interesting about this is that, again, as we shrink and grow the range selector, what we're doing is we're increasing the size of that wedge, right? So if I wanted this to animate through, I wouldn't alter the end and start things. I would basically have the wave go through using the offset. So then it goes, well, maybe not fart noise, but if I use the ramp up, as you can see, it's starting at that 0 minus 200 and then returning to a state of normalcy. So we can maybe add the property of opacity in here, right? Say 0 like this. So as we use the offset to push that change through, that's what happens, right? So far so good, right? Now, the other thing to sort of get down with here is the idea of smoothness. So I'm just going to put a keyframe here for the offset. Boop, 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 boop. And we're going to push this thing all the way through with the offset. And we can see how it all comes down. Nice and relaxed, right? You can see the difference. not really feeling the italic. Let's actually make this medium so we can really enjoy this. So everything is kind of just falling down normally. The other things that are in here are things like ease high and ease low. All right. And those are, there we go, twirl that open. We had ease high and ease low. If I increase the ease low, what we're doing is we're essentially applying an easy ease to one side of the animation, towards the start or the end. And in this case, when we're easing, see it's easing into, nice and easy when it lands, right? So that's what ease low is. Now if we reverse that, we can reverse that so that we are easing high. Right? Because the ease is on the high end, right? So put them both to 100 and both ends are eased. We are eased at the top and bottom, meaning a pinched acceleration in the middle. If we want to sort of visualize what that means, I'll just show you with a circle. We've got this circle and its position is going to change from here to here, or maybe here to here, right? So this would be a linear kind of relationship. If we were to ease it, we look at the graph, we're sort of easing both ends. If we were to ease low and keep this linear, this would be 100% on the ease low, because this has an influence of 100. Well, it's close, but I mean, this would have an influence of like 0. But see, that's the same kind of graph. We're easing low, or on the back end, right? We could ease high. If we ease high, it's going to look like this. Snap. See, it's got that snap. That's what's happening. We're just easing using different words and a different way of sort of explaining those words. What else is going on in the advanced tab that you might want to know about? You have this random order that's kind of fun. So, you know that hard work you did, choosing a range. Well, just randomize it. No one cares, right? So you can do that. That's pretty much it. Not sure what else there is to talk about in here. Range selector. What's that smoothness? There should be a smoothness in here somewhere. Boop, 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 boop. Animator 1. Wonder why I can't see it. What's going on with me today? I'm just not looking. Just not looking. Anyway, hopefully that explains a little bit. Well, now I'm just confused about where the typewriter thing is. Advanced smoothness. Yeah, smoothness right on their shape. What am I looking at? How weird is that? Oh, there it is. It's got to be square, because you can smooth out the square part. Anyway, hopefully that helped us out to talk a little bit about the advanced stuff. And as promised, the next question we're going to talk about is the write on. Let's write things on. All right, let's do that. So the way you write stuff on is going to be dependent on sort of the font and what challenges you have to overcome with that font, right? So I guess the first thing we want to do is find a nice scripty font. Scripty font. What would be a nice scripty font? What is a scripty font? Let's see. What have I got in here? Something scripty. Oh, LustoScript. Now we're talking. Now we're on to something. Let's go regular display. I don't know. Okay. This isn't exactly what you mean, right? Right on. Great vibes. So Andrew, big fan of the stream. We see him here all the time. Andrew, this font, I guess, is scripty, but, big but, one of the big issues is it doesn't have a lot of those overlapping points that I would imagine that you encounter, right? I guess it does. It's got these weird little filigrees on it, little embellishments that are nasty. Okay, so how would we make this happen? There's a few ways, and your methodology is going to depend on what else you want to do with it. So in our case, maybe we just need it to write on. Let's just do that. And there are many, many ways, and yeah, usually with the lowercase t, right? That's where the crap happens, right? So specifically, you know what? Let's not use Lust script then. Let's use something that has a more defined T in it. Yeah, let's use... Here we go. Here's the nightmare scenario, I guess, with these things that kind of overlap each other. All right, this is Reclam script. It's very tight. I guess so. I guess it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be that way. So a few things you'd probably want to do is probably kern this up a little bit so that it makes it a little bit better. So there's a few considerations. What are we going to do with it? Cursive text reveal. Yeah, that's the idea, right? We're going to try to reveal this cursive text. And there are many, many ways to do it. We could start doing it with masks. That could be a fun way to do it, right? You could just look at this thing and be like, all right, well, I need to start drawing some masks. And that's going to be terrible because I have to animate it a bunch. And I might have to do a lot of manual labor. And define stuff, right? So if I just go do, and then we would say, oh, well, this is the ending state, so let's walk it backwards, right? If we're walking it backwards, you know, somewhere around here would be a spot, and then we walk it backwards a little bit more. Let's keep walking it back, and we go do. This is sort of the method I prescribe in a really old tutorial around here. And we walk it back even more, keep on walking it back. So this is the most labor-intensive, very annoying way to do this kind of thing, right? So, but this is one method that I'm sure some people have had to do, you know, and it offers you fine control of these moments, right? Oh, what the hell? What am I grabbing in there? There we go. A little fine control right here. I think that's a nice stop point, and then we would be like, oh, kind of like here, right here, and then we go a little bit further on in time. We would end up with, you know, this kind of like this. There we go. Coming around like here, pop, and then at this juncture. Ugh, come on, select things today, just like that. So you can see, as this thing is coming on, we've done a whole letter, and it took quite a long time to do. You know, that was perhaps not the best use of our time, one might say. I'm sure a producer would say that. I'm sure a director would say that. I'm saying it right now. Perhaps not the best use of our time. And you can, but this does offer you this kind of ability to make things, you know, a little bit softer if you want. You get a nice fine control of what's going on, like that. And then you can grab these keyframes and squish them and stuff. So now it's going faster, right? Which is super great, I suppose. And then you just need to fine tune them. So that's how we might do it. That's one way. That's definitely a tedious way to do it. Absolutely, yeah. That's very, very tedious. Very, very not good, right? So, and not fun either. Not a lot of fun. So that's method one, right? Let's call that method one, and we'll come back to a better method, or at least a different method. And the problem with masks is ultimately you end up drawing a lot of stuff. Like you got this way here where you'd end up and then get the C, and then we come into here. But if it's going to take maybe 12 frames to do this entire thing on, you'd really just be doing 12, 12 masks of varying size and stuff. So not a huge deal to be doing that, I don't think. But let's move on to another method. What would be a different way to make this happen? Well, you could make it happen by using mats, M-A-T-T-E. So what we'd be doing is creating a mat, M-A-T-T-E mat. And what I like to do is use a nice, bright, obnoxious stroke, just hurt everybody's eyes, A fairly thick one, there we go. Boop-a-doop-boo. Can't see my keyboard because I got a microphone in the way. All right, so what we would do is we would just start drawing a stroke out here. So it would be drawing. My name is Simon and I like to do drawings. There we go. Now I've drawn a very bad path. Oh yes, not good at all. Very terrible, Evan. You're really showing it off today. All right. However, this path doesn't need to be perfect. And it doesn't need to be perfect because we're not actually going to see it. This path is simply going to reveal the thing under it. So then we just puff it up until it is of a size that it, covers this but not that. And then we would say, well, you should be using an alpha mat of that thing. Oh, look at it. It's beautiful. We would go in here. We would add a trim paths, right? We'd add the trim paths. The trim paths would go burp. Come up like that and flip it around like that. We're able to go into the stroke here and we're able to say, well, here in the stroke, we could make it a butt cap or a round cap. Oh, look, now it's kind of round, eh? Perfect. Now we've got that going on. So this would be another way to do it. And you get a little bit of fine control, right? So that's good, a good move to have this thing come on. So that's another way to do it. You do end up with these kind of nasty parts here, you'll notice. So this is, PJ nasty parts, because this part is overlapping with this part, right? And it's making that little bit of nastiness, which we don't necessarily want. Something you can do, though, because this is a separate layer, is you can do like a roughen, come on, type in the box. There we go, roughen edges. You can do a little roughen edges on this bad boy here and kind of mess with its border a little bit so that it's not so clean. You could have a little more fractal influence maybe. No. What we want to do is decrease the scale. Yeah, just chunkify the whole thing. You could do that. You could make it a little bit wavier. Edge, sharpen that edge up a little bit. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there we go. There we go. It's a little bit chunkified like that. Boom, kind of like that. Or something else that's fun, because you really want to make those edges nice. You can just pre-compose this. Sure, let's call this. And, as you know, this is now the alpha bounds of this layer. So if we applied a roughen edges to it, we're roughing the entire thing. So those spots that were nasty, those nasty spots, we can smooth those out a little bit using something like a roughen edges to get them to be a little bit more blobulous, right? So like that. So now it's looking a little bit more blobby. And, we could do that to the mask as well, right? So this is the method you're probably usually using. Yeah, there you go. So now we get into the terrible part. It won't work on the letter T or the letter R. The letters T and R. So how do we fix up nasty T and R? How will we fix that? So now we arrive at the sad juncture, because we know that what we want to do, this font is built of, or appears to be made of, shapes, right? Appears to be made of shapes. Why don't we just convert it to some shapes? Let's do that. So we would Why is it so hard to find things today? Text. There we go. Create shapes from text. Oh boy, my brain. So you can see these are the shapes that define the text. What I want to do is isolate some of them, right? So what I would actually like to do is, I'm not sure if any of y'all have been enjoying the delightful Overlord extension. You can do this with Overlord, without Overlord. So what we want to do is isolate the shapes, work with the shapes. There's really nothing you can do about these T cross pieces without isolating them, without taking them off, without, removing them in some way. So you could do that in Illustrator, you could do that in here. Let's do it to the letter T here. So what we would do, let me just start over and just only have the letter T. I think that would be probably a good move. T, or T. Ooh, I like that T better. Why are we not using that one? So here's a letter T. Awesome. So I say it's a letter T. I don't really know. There are obviously parts that overlap, right? This obviously has to overlap. This one here doesn't overlap. Good for it. So let's go into the text. There we go. Make some shapes from it. So we're going to end up with actually 2 shapes. I don't think we need the rest of these. We can just not observe them. Shy them out. We're going to end up with 2 shapes. The first one is going to be, oh, is this an F? This is an F? Okay, well, take your word for it. In our case, this is a weird squiggle, right? So I'm going to call this the vertical stick part, and this is the whoosh. I don't know. People who went to college for this kind of thing know all the names of parts of font or typography or whatever. So if we're just dealing with the horizontal whoosh, let's just start deleting parts of this that are not that. Poop, poop, poop. That goes away. What else can go away? All of this should go away. Boop. In fact, it'll no longer be a closed path, right? So this is where I would recommend that we work in Illustrator instead, because a lot of the little surgeries we need to do can be done best in Illustrator. And again, this is something that we need to figure out when we want to do one thing or the other thing. What was the name of this font? Reclam? Why do I have this? Anyway. Okay, so we go in here, we would create outlines. Boop. Bam. So we've created some outlines. And again, we're doing the same thing. We're going to end up with 2 layers. One is going to have some of the parts, the other will have the other parts. Great. So let's sort of isolate this vertical stick part, just deleting all the points that don't make the thing we want. Yeah, that's about it. We would use the pen tool here to just kind of link those back up. Awesome. Delete those. Again, we're using the pen tool to just kind of link these parts back up. So that's the vertical part. We got it. Now we need this horizontally part, and pay special attention to here where things are going to overlap. And that part is important. So I'm going to remind myself and the viewer boop, that part is important. Right? And we won't edit that in any way, but that is where the overlap will take place. That is where this will stop and this will begin, meaning that we need to start deleting some stuff. Oh, let's just fill that gap in while I'm working. Cool. Deleting some stuff, deleting some stuff, deleting some stuff, deleting some stuff. And here we go. This connects with that. This connects with this. Thank you, warning. So now we have these two parts, this part and this part. It's okay if they overlap. So, in fact, I would suggest you do overlap them a little bit. So now we have these two parts. Cool. So then we would just go back into the Illustrator, and we would say, well, all right, well, I'm going to use Overlord to pull these things in. Cool. We'll use a fill that is the same as this. Okay. You know what I should have done? Should have done that. So just delete this. Boop. Back over here. Yes, I've got the things selected. Yes, pull it in from Illustrator. We've got these two things like this. Now, I know what you're saying. People are like, oh, well, this is even more tedious than that first thing, right? It's even more horrible than that first thing you said, right? Now I have to animate this on and then that on. Well, it's true. It is absolutely true. That is something you will have to do. We do get to save ourselves a little bit of labor in that we can have one sort of line that's going to, ooh, too thick. There we go. That is going to serve for both pieces, I think. So this should work out, I think. Make sure you cover it all. Cover everything. Keep it covered. Boop, 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 boop. So we got this one thing coming on, eh? Pretty cool. And we're going to call this the mat of F. And it's going to be, you know, fuchsia. Awesome. And so here we're able to define how does that thing write on, right? Well, again, we add the trim path, and the trim path goes from 0 to 100%. Oops, now I've got it going from 100 to 100%. Man, too fast. And you know what? Like we said, we can make the stroke, make it a rounded cap. Awesome. We can slow that down even more if we want. And both of these layers need to reference that as their source. So you could just duplicate this and have two copies. That's fun. You could use like a set mat. You could use the set mat effect if you really want to. Look at mat F. Like that. And copy this, paste it here. Don't look at that anymore. But here's the trouble, right? The trouble is that it's still revealing that other thing. It's revealing that part that we're not interested in. So how do we curtail that particular problem? Well, what you have are two things, and only one of them needs this at certain points. So what I would typically end up doing is just animating them on separately and distinctly, right? So we've got this thing here, and so when is it happening? Well, it's happening here, and make sure I actually have these things. So this is the vertical one. Vertical one is fine. The horizontal one is the one that's a bummer. You know, it is not cool. So what we can do is, I think we can just, no, not that. Getting a headache. One of those classic headaches. Boop, boop. You under you, there we go. Dead air, not good. All right, here we go. This is the problem. So we've got this. Let's look. Oh, you know what? I need to label these. That's the problem. This is horizontal. This is vertical. All right, solid, good. So the things you could do, there are many things you might do. You might have the vertical, boop, 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 boop. And right here, the vertical's done. We're done with that vertical thing. Awesome. so it doesn't need to keep going anywhere, but this is where the horizontal kind of picks up, right? So with the horizontal part, there we go. Boop, boop. What we do is we just adjust to not have that top part. Wonderful. And then we don't need this. In fact, we don't even need to see this until here. There we go. Now, as you can tell, that's not super great. So, what we end up with, that's pretty exacting. That's pretty much the specific thing that we wanted as a. Boop, boop. There we go. This is basically what we wanted, right? We wanted to be able to draw this thing on. Yep, it is very difficult. Now, we would say that there is nothing without labor, and there's no thing that'll look good without having to work on it, and this is no exception. Especially when you consider that writing things on is not... It's not intuitive in that we don't have the overlapping pieces already separated. So you need to be able to separate them, then you can make use of them individually, right? So that's how it goes. Why can't we duplicate the text layer and scale it up? Why can't we use it as an alpha? Oh yeah, I guess you could. I don't see why not. You could. Why can't we? Yeah, so the blue layers are looking at the fuchsia layers to define their space. The fuchsia layers are the alpha mat of the blue layers, if that makes sense. Rothu, I'm not sure I understand. Rothu, are you saying, why can't we duplicate the text layer and scale it up, and then why can't we use it as an alpha? I think you could use anything as an alpha. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think I follow. We've got a bit more time. Actually, oh, no, we don't. We really spent a lot of time. Still spent a lot of time on this. So, any other quandaries, I suppose? I got a bit more time today. Any other quandaries? What's my go-to typeface for commercial jobs? The one that the client already uses as their branding and is included in the branding guide there, Peter. That is the one you use for most commercial jobs. And trim path the shape. Why not convert the text into shape? Then trim path the shape. Ms. Moab. Why don't we do that? Right? Why would we not do such a thing? Well... So the reason we can't just trim path a text layer, right? Or, yeah. Yeah, let's keep working in this pile of garbage here. The reason that we would take some text. So we would take some text. When we convert it to shape layers, create shapes. If we added a trim paths to this, you think, oh, well, just add a trim path, right? What does that look like? Well, that looks pretty wacky is how that looks. It's interesting, but strange. That's what happens when you just apply that. So we can see. But tough to say. Well, you're very welcome, Andrew. I'm glad that was helpful. Hopefully it gets you where you're going. Unfortunately, the sad answer is... with write-on effects, sometimes you just have to do a lot of labor. Something I often recommend, if you have... Joel, I know about the expression selectors. Will I explain them? We do not have the time today. That will be a thing for a later tutorial. It's essentially using expressions to choose which things you're selecting, right? And that's really just a little bit of expression language, but that's about it. So I think this will wrap it up for today. Oh, what's my plan for Adobe Live? Well, automating typefaces, every letter animated in comp. Good. So everybody, I guess we'll. Sorry, I got caught reading the chat. That happens all the time for me. So thank you everybody for coming out. We're gonna call it here. It's like 11 o'clock. I'm starting to lose my voice. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you've learned about text layers. If you're watching this live, then that. Let's start that over. If you're watching this live, next week I'll be at Adobe in San Francisco doing more live stuff. Probably better prepared than I was today. What will we be doing? Adobe Live is going to be next Wednesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. So tune in from 1 to 3 Pacific time. And what are we going to be talking about? Interesting stuff. It's going to be mostly about titles, I believe, is what we're talking about. It's going to be me and another excellent person, Jake Bartlett, Jake in Motion. So you can see him. We'll be talking and chatting about what's cool. So so hopefully this has been helpful. If you've enjoyed, subscribe, turn on notifications, and you'll find out when more stuff goes on. If you want to kind of have a say about what we talk about on these streams, you should definitely check out the polls that kind of go up on the community station or community page. I don't know, man. Today's a hard day. But yeah, hopefully y'all come out for the stream next week. I'd love to see everybody there. Bring your big time questions. And that'll be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this has been good. This is going to be archived forever on the YouTubes, so you can see all my terrible mistakes as I fumble over myself. I need to oh, the weekend is coming, eh? As a freelancer, I don't know what those are. So yeah, thank you so much for coming out, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now. And boop. Oh, did I hit it? There we go.